Are you tired of waiting for the right content to find you? Let me tell you something that still keeps me up at night. My childhood wasn't easy. When I was young, my parents were in a devastating car accident. My father didn't survive. My mother made it, but her injuries never fully healed. Walking has been a struggle for her ever since. She raised me in the house my dad left behind, and for a while, it was just the two of us. When I was around 10, she started dating again. She'd be away from home more often, and during those stretches, my Uncle Steve would stay with us. He became the closest thing I had to a father. We'd throw a ball around in the yard, go to movies, look after our pets together. He filled a gap that nothing else could. Those are memories I should have been making with my dad. But as I got older, things shifted. My mom remarried, and Uncle Steve started showing up less and less. By the time I was 16, he just stopped coming around entirely. No explanation, no goodbye. My mom was always vague about it whenever I asked, which honestly made it worse. Knowing her, she was trying to protect me. She's always been the type to absorb pain so others don't have to. I assumed maybe he was sick, maybe something worse. By 18, the house was essentially mine. Mom had moved in with her husband, stopping by only occasionally. And I won't pretend I hated having my own space at that age. I had friends over, I lived freely. But there were quiet moments, especially late at night, when the emptiness of that big house felt suffocating. I missed having someone around who actually cared about me. The only constant was my dog, Jojo, an Australian shepherd, 13 years old, graying around the muzzle, but still my guy. He slept beside me every single night. Then came January. The Christmas tree was still standing in the corner of the living room when I woke up one night and reached over, and Jojo wasn't there. I figured he needed to go outside. I called his name as I came down the stairs. Nothing. I walked into the kitchen, and there he was, standing completely still in the dark, staring down the open basement stairs. He turned his head just briefly when he heard me, tail giving a single, slow wag. Then his gaze snapped right back down into the darkness below. I stepped beside him and looked down. "What is it, boy?" His tail stiffened. I hit the light switch and stared down the staircase. Nothing visible. I pulled Jojo back by the collar, shut the basement door, and brought him upstairs with me. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he'd heard a mouse. Maybe the pipes had made a noise, but I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, Jojo would lift his head and stare at the bedroom doorway like he was still tracking something. Eventually, I made a decision. I wasn't going to lie there paralyzed. I got up. I went back downstairs. Jojo followed. And again, he planted himself right at that basement door, locked in position, staring into the dark below. I don't know what made me do it, but I leaned toward the stairs and called out, "Is someone there?" Silence. I turned on the light and started walking down. Those old steps creaked under every footstep. You couldn't see the full basement until you were about halfway down because of how low the ceiling sat. I was on maybe the third step when I heard it. A voice calling my name, weak, strained, like someone who was hurt. But I knew that voice immediately, even after all those years. It was Uncle Steve. I flew down the remaining steps. My heart was hammering, but when I reached the bottom, nothing. An empty basement. No one behind the couch. No one behind the TV. The only place left was the laundry room in the far corner. I moved toward it, and just as I got close, I heard the faintest sound from behind that door. Something took over my body completely. I ran. I sprinted up those stairs like I was 6 years old, left the light blazing behind me, barely managed to yank the basement door shut, and didn't stop until I was in my room with the door locked and Jojo pressed against me. Jojo barked, the first time I'd heard him bark in months. I called my mom, over and over until she picked up. I was whispering and shouting at the same time, telling her someone was in the basement, that I knew the voice, that Jojo had heard it too. She was calm, too calm. She let me finish. Then she said quietly that I'd probably just had a bad dream. I pushed back hard. I told her Jojo reacted too. I wasn't imagining it. And that's when she paused, and I heard something shift in her voice. She told me the truth. Uncle Steve had gotten cancer. He'd passed away years ago. She hadn't told me because she couldn't bear adding more grief to my life after everything I'd already lost. I couldn't process it. I told her it didn't matter right now. Someone with his voice was in my basement at that very moment. She stopped me. If someone is actually in that house, call the police right now. So I did. Officers arrived, knocked, rang the bell. I let them in and walked them straight to that door. They told me to stay upstairs. I didn't listen. I walked them through everything, where I stood, what I heard, where I searched. Then I pointed to the one place I hadn't checked, the laundry room. They opened the door, hit the light, empty. Completely, absolutely empty. I looked insane. I knew it. We went back upstairs. They cleared the rest of the house, and they left with the quiet professionalism of people who believed I'd frightened myself awake. I called my mom again. She answered immediately. She finished telling me everything, why she'd kept it from me, why she thought distance was kinder than grief. I told her that was wrong, that not knowing was its own kind of torture. But none of that explained the voice. When the call ended, I pulled Jojo close and just held him. I didn't sleep for hours, and for a week after that, I couldn't go near that basement door. Jojo had stopped staring at it, but I hadn't. What I know is this: if Jojo hadn't been there that night, I could have talked myself out of it, told myself it was exhaustion, a dream bleeding into waking. But he heard something too. He reacted before I ever went downstairs. Something was there. My mom sold that house about a year later. I wasn't sorry to leave. I was 24 and renting the upper half of an old house. It wasn't a proper apartment. Someone years ago had converted the second floor into a livable space. Bedroom, bathroom, a small kitchen, a living room. Functional, bare bones, but mine. The landlord lived out of state, so I rarely heard from him. The first floor was empty, supposedly mid-renovation before he found a new tenant. That part always sat a little uneasy with me. Every night, I was sleeping above a dark, vacant floor. But the rent was cheap, and I told myself I was overthinking it. The first few weeks were uneventful. Then, one night around 1 a.m., while I was lying in bed scrolling my phone, I heard a single footstep from directly below me. Clear enough that I went completely still and waited. A few seconds later, another one. Slow, deliberate. someone moving across the downstairs living room. I sat up and listened. I ran through the usual explanations. Houses settle, pipes expand, old buildings creak and knock for no real reason. But this was different. This had weight behind it, the heaviness of an actual body on old floorboards. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing and went to sleep. The next day, I went down and checked. Door was locked. I opened it anyway and looked inside. Dusty floors, bare walls, a broken table shoved in one corner. Still, quiet. I felt a little foolish. 2 nights later, it happened again. 12:30 a.m., same slow footsteps. 3 or 4, then silence. A few more, then nothing. I stood in the middle of my living room and listened through the floor, muting the TV completely. It lasted about 2 minutes. I texted a friend. He joked that my new downstairs neighbor had finally moved in. I didn't laugh. It kept happening, night after night, always late, always from below. Footsteps mostly, but once, a cabinet door, a single clean click of something shutting. I called the landlord. He sounded more irritated than worried. Said no one had a key except him and me. Old houses, he told me, make strange sounds. If I was really concerned, I could call the police, but he didn't think it warranted that. That response made me feel worse, not better. One Friday, I came home late, nearly 2 a.m. The moment I stepped into my apartment, something felt wrong. Nothing looked different. The lights were off the way I'd left them, but the air felt different, like the space had been recently occupied. I stood still and listened. Then a thud from below, something hitting a wall. I backed up fast, nearly tripping over my own rug. I stood staring at the floor. Then came footsteps again. I walked out, got in my car, and called the police. 2 officers came. They checked the entire first floor and the exterior of the building. No signs of forced entry, nobody inside. They were polite, but their faces said what their mouths didn't. They thought I was rattled over nothing. For a few days, I nearly agreed with them. Then I started noticing things. Coming home from work one afternoon, the first floor door was open about an inch. I knew I'd shut it after the officers left. Another time, I caught the smell of cigarette smoke drifting from around the side of the building near one of the downstairs windows. I don't smoke. My neighbors didn't either, as far as I knew. Then one night, the footsteps came again, and this time, they stopped directly beneath my bedroom. I lay in bed, holding my breath. 10 seconds of silence. Then 3 taps. Light but deliberate, from the floor just below me. Then 3 more. I texted my friend, told him I needed somewhere to stay. While I waited for his reply, the tapping came again. I left without changing clothes. The next day, he came back with me. We went through the hole downstairs, found nothing at first. Then he crouched near a kitchen cabinet and went quiet. What is that? Jammed way back under the cabinet, barely visible, a cigarette butt. It looked recent. That was the moment it stopped feeling like my imagination. I called the landlord again and told him exactly what we'd found. This time he took it seriously and said he'd drive out the following day. I stayed somewhere else that night. When he arrived, he called me and told me everything looked fine on the surface, but one of the back windows had a faulty latch. It looked shut from inside, but from the outside, someone could force it up just enough to squeeze through. His theory? Somebody local had figured it out and was using the empty first floor as shelter. I felt sick hearing that. I told him I was leaving. He said he'd fix the window immediately. Didn't matter. I'd already made up my mind. That same evening, I went back once more to grab clothes and my laptop. I was upstairs filling a duffel bag when it came from directly below me. Not footsteps this time. A cough from the first floor hallway. Unmistakable. I grabbed the bag and was out the door in seconds. Didn't even think about what I was leaving behind. I called the police from the car. This time, they found something. Scuff marks and fresh dirt on the back windowsill. And in a closet downstairs, a blanket. One I had never seen before. I was out by the weekend. To this day, any sound in the house at night puts me somewhere else entirely. Back in that apartment. Back above that empty floor. My name is Chris. This happened when I was 22. I was living upstairs in a mother-daughter house owned by my parents. My older brother Tom had the downstairs unit. We each had our own entrance in our own space, but there was an interior door connecting both floors, useful if either of us needed the other quickly. One week, Tom flew to Mexico with his fiancée. I had the whole place to myself. The night started like any other. Home around 7, chicken and rice on the stove, TV on in the background. Nothing unusual. After dinner, I cleaned up, sat on the couch for a while, and eventually decided to go to bed early. I was just starting to drift off when music started playing from the living room. Loud, sudden, completely out of nowhere. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was hearing. It was my Amazon Alexa sitting on the kitchen counter. The song was slow, instrumental, with a strange, unsettling tone I didn't recognize. I called from bed, "Alexa, stop!" Twice. No response. I got up, walked down the hallway, said it louder. The music cut off instantly. I looked at the device for a moment, assumed it was a glitch, went back to bed. A few minutes later, just as I was falling asleep again, "Sorry, I didn't quite get that. I'm having trouble understanding." I got up again, unplugged it from the wall, and went back to bed. I fell asleep this time. I'm not sure how much time passed. Then the music came back, blasting. Same sudden jolt awake, same disorientation, and then the realization. I had unplugged it. I walked down the hallway slowly this time. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. I called out for it to stop as I got closer. The music shut off. I looked at the counter. The Alexa was plugged back in. I stood there for a long moment. There was no scenario in which that made sense. Unless I'd walked out here in my sleep and done it myself, which I didn't believe for a second. I remembered pulling that cord out with my own hands. I went back to my room and locked the door, texted Tom asking if he'd come back early, if this was some kind of prank. Then I noticed his location was still showing Mexico at the top of the screen. I pulled a chair up against the door and sat with my ear close, listening. For about 10 minutes, the apartment was completely silent. Then I heard it. From the living room, a whisper, low but clear. 2 words I understood immediately. "Alexa, play." Then something after that I couldn't make out. The Alexa responded. The music started again, blasting through the apartment. I called 911, and instead of staying quiet, I started yelling, telling whoever was out there that I was on the phone with the police, that they needed to get out now. I don't know why I did that. Fear, probably. Panic. I was 22 and terrified, and my instinct in that moment wasn't to trap them. It was to get them gone. The music drowned everything out. I had no idea if they were still there or already gone. When the song ended, I yelled for it to stop. It did. Officers arrived within minutes. I stayed locked in my room until I heard them call my name. I came out and walked them through everything. They checked the upstairs, then went down through the interior door to the lower unit. They came back and told me the house was clear. Then one of them mentioned the front door was wide open when they arrived. That door had been locked. I was certain of it. Whoever had been there got out through the front. But that still didn't answer how they'd gotten in to begin with. They left. I locked everything that could be locked and barely slept. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Tom had been gone for days. The downstairs had been empty that whole time. What if someone had found a way in and had been down there, and that night, for whatever reason, decided to come upstairs? I stayed at a friend's place the following night. When Tom got home, I told him everything. He only believed me because I showed him the police record. We swept both floors together and didn't find anything missing or out of place. The first thing we did was install cameras, front door, back door, both interior entrances. It never happened again. Eventually, our parents decided to rent the whole property out and had us find our own apartment. Honestly, I was relieved. When something like that happens in a place, the place never feels the same. Every room carries it. You start associating the walls with that feeling, that cold, specific fear of not being alone when you're supposed to be. Some things don't leave when you do.